Good evening, ladies and menfolk. Welcome to another book review. Now, last week I teased that we would be doing another series by Yen Press, but turns out that I'm missing book one in that particular series. I lent it to someone and I have no idea who it was or when they're getting it back to me. So, in the meantime, while I hunt down another copy of that book for myself and for the review, we're going to do a standalone book by Richard Bach. Now, if that name sounds semi-familiar, he's the same author who did Jonathan Livingston Seagull. But this one, I like a lot more than Jonathan Livingston Seagull. We are doing the book Illusions, The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah. Now, this is a great little tiny book, just for you viewers there. See, it's really small, it's nice and short, it's a quick little read, but it really makes you think. It's one of those, so... Unfortunately, there's not really much of a back cover blurb. I mean, you just have a one-liner right there. More than a great national bestseller, a great way of looking at life. Which, yeah, it's interesting, but it doesn't really tell you much about the book itself. So, what we're going to do is have a little story time. Now, basically all of chapter 1 is kind of the Cliff's Notes version of the concepts that's going to be covered in the series, done in a little parable style. And we are going to go through the whole first chapter, because it's relatively quick, all things considered. So, let's dive in, shall we? Chapter 1. There was a master come unto the earth, born in the holy land of Indiana, raised in the mystical hills east of Fort Wayne. The master learned of this world in the public schools of Indiana, and as he grew in his trade as a mechanic of automobiles. Hold on, that's awkwardly phrased. The master learned of this world in the public schools of Indiana, and as he grew in his trade as a mechanic of automobiles. No, that's still awkwardly phrased. Weird. But the master had learnings from other lands and other schools, from other lives that he had lived. He remembered these, and remembering became wise and strong, so that others saw his strength and came to him for counsel. The master believed that he had power to help himself and all mankind, and as he believed, so it was for him, so that others saw his power and came to him to be healed of their troubles and their many diseases. The master believed that it is well for any man to think upon himself as a son of God, and as he believed, so it was, and the shops and garages where he worked became crowded and jammed with those who sought his learnings and his touch, and the streets outside with those who longed only that the shadow of his passing might fall upon them and change their lives. It came to pass, because of the crowds, that the several foremen and shop managers bid the master leave his tools and go his way, for so tightly was he thronged that neither he nor other mechanics had room to work upon the automobiles. So it was that he went into the countryside, and people following began to call him Messiah, and worker of miracles, and as they believed, it was so. If a storm passed as he spoke, not a raindrop touched a listener's head. The last of the multitude heard his words as clearly as the first, no matter lightning nor thunder in the sky about. And always he spoke to them in parables. And he said unto them, Within each of us lies the power of our consent to health and to sickness, to riches and to poverty, to freedom and to slavery. It is we who control these, and not another. A millman spoke and said, Easy words for you, master, for you are guided as we are not, and need not toil as we toil. A man has to work for his living in this world. The master answered and said, Once there lived a village of creatures along the bottom of a great crystal river. The current of the river swept silently over them all, young and old, rich and poor, good and evil, the current going its own way, knowing only its own crystal self. Each creature, in its own manner, clung tightly to the twigs and rocks of the river bottom, for clinging was their way of life, and resisting the current what each had learned from birth. But one creature said at last, "I am tired of clinging. Though I cannot see it with my eyes, I trust that the current knows where it is going. I shall let go and let it take me where it will. Clinging, I shall die of boredom." The other creatures laughed and said, "Fool! Let go, and that current you worship will throw you tumbled and smashed across the rocks, and you will die quicker than boredom." But the one heeded them not, and taking a breath, did let go, and at once was tumbled and smashed by the current across the rocks. Yet in time, as the creature refused to cling again, the current lifted him free from the bottom, and he was bruised and hurt no more. And the creatures downstream, to whom he was a stranger, cried, "See, a miracle! A creature like ourselves, yet he flies! See the Messiah come to save us all!" And the one carried in the current said, "I am no more Messiah than you. The river delights to lift us free, if only we dare let go. Our true work is this voyage, this adventure." But they cried the more, "Savior!" all the while clinging to the rocks, and when they looked again he was gone, and they were left alone making legends of a Savior. And it came to pass, when he saw that the multitude thronged him the more day on day, tighter and closer and fiercer than ever they had, when he saw that they pressed him to heal them without rest, and feed them always with his miracles, to learn for them and to live their lives, he went above that day unto a hilltop apart, and there he prayed. And he said in his heart, "Infinite radiant is, if it be thy will, let this cup pass from me. Let me lay aside the impossible task. I cannot live the life of one other soul, yet 10,000 cry to me for life. I'm sorry I allowed it all to happen. If it be thy will, let me go back to my engines and my tools, and let me live as other men." And a voice spoke to him on the hilltop, a voice neither male nor female, loud nor soft, a voice infinitely kind. And the voice said unto him, "Not my will, but thine be done. For what is thy will is mine for thee. Go thy way as other men, and be thou happy on the earth." And hearing, the master was glad, and gave thanks, and came down from the hilltop, humming a little mechanic song. And when the throng pressed him with its woes, beseeching him to heal for it, and learn for it, and feed it non-stop from his understanding, and to entertain it with his wonders, he smiled upon the multitude, and said pleasantly unto them, "I quit." For a moment the multitude was stricken dumb with astonishment. And he said unto them, "If a man told God that he wanted most of all to help the suffering world, no matter the price to himself, and God answered and told him what he must do, should the man do as he is told?" "Of course, master," cried the many. "It should be the pleasure of him to suffer the tortures of hell itself, should God ask it. No matter what those tortures, nor how difficult the task. Honor be hanged, glory to be nailed to a tree and burned, if so be that God has asked," said they. "And what would you do," the master said unto the multitude, "if God spoke directly to your face, and said, 'I command that you be happy in the world as long as you live'? What would you do then?" And the multitude was silent. Not a voice, not a sound was heard upon the hillsides, across the valleys where they stood. And the master said unto the silence, "In the path of our happiness shall we find the learning for which we have chosen the lifetime. So it is that I have learned this day, and so choose to leave you now to walk your own path as you please." And he went his way through the crowds and left them, and he returned to the everyday world of men and machines. So that is chapter 1 of Illusions, The Adventures of the Reluctant Messiah. Now, it's not all like that, so don't get the wrong impression. That is as biblical parable style as it's going to get. I mean, it focuses primarily on two characters. You have Donald P. Shimoda, who is the reluctant Messiah, who comes across Richard, who is a fellow aviator, I guess the term would be. They both happen to fly prop planes, going around the countryside, giving rides to the people nearby for a bit of money and food and all that good stuff. But meanwhile, you're still a little more knowledgeable about the multiverse than most normal human beings, so Richard slowly realizes just how much Donald can do, even when he doesn't necessarily realize it, I think. And you see the character progression of both as the reluctant Messiah tries to find how to effectively retire, and then you have Richard who starts reading the Messiah's Handbook. Hold on. What was the full title? Messiah's Handbook. Handbook for the Advanced Soul. Now, who knew there was a handbook for Messiahs? That is a full book that I would not mind reading. That would be interesting. But you only get a few little snippets throughout the entire book of just what is in this Messiah's Handbook. To give you an idea of some of the little phrasings for the Messiah, you are never given a wish without also being given the power to make it true. You may have to work at it, however. And what are some other good ones? The truth you speak has no past and no future. It is, and that's all it needs to be. So, I mean, it really is interesting, some of the concepts they bring up. And, I mean, you get little peeks into, what would that be? Levitation, being able to walk through walls. He picks up a guitar, never having touched one before, no idea how to play, never practiced, never trained. Picks it up. I know how to play this. And then he does. And he plays it beautifully. Wish I could do that for a whole slew of things. That would be fantastic. Although it would make school completely irrelevant. Which to some would be very nice as well. Let's see, what else do they offer in the little handbook? Your only obligation in any lifetime is to be true to yourself. Being true to anyone else or anything else is not only impossible, but the mark of a fake messiah. Yeah, it's a fun little read. It really doesn't take that long. It can be a little tricky to track down nowadays because it was published in 1977, and I don't think they've reprinted it in a good while now, possibly even since then. So your best bet is probably Amazon or Books a Million online or Barnes and Noble's online. It's basically an online book retailer of preference. You might be able to track it down in a brick and mortar bookstore, but no guarantees. A lot of secondhand bookstores may have it, but I mean, secondhand bookstores, it's always hit or miss as to what they'll have at any given time. But most of the places that I'm familiar with, if you ask them to reserve it, should it come in, then they make a notation in their system. They'll give you a call if it ever comes through their store, and you can pick up a copy. Now, let's see. I think I've rambled on long enough about this tiny little book, as fantastic as it is. If you have read it, post a comment in the video. What did you think of the book? What do you think of how it ended? Because, as with most messiahs, things do not end happily or cleanly or conveniently. Yeah. Not going to spoil it for people, but it is interesting to see how it all ends. And it's interesting to see the character progression for Richard, who's basically the character we're primarily following from his perspective, even though Donald is the Messiah with all the fantastical powers and knowledge. It's interesting to see his progression from just normal everyday flyer to he could do pretty much whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, if he so chose, but he chooses not to, for the most part. And there's a balance to be found, I think, and I think he finds it. And for any questions or comments or whatever you have, if I missed something about this book that you really want to talk about, again, post a comment or reach out to us via our email. wordninja at fcwriters.com, or check out our site for other book reviews and stuff. I may get to the other Yen Press series next week. Depends on if I can track down that other book. If not, I have a whole queue of other series that I will be covering. And that's about it, guys, for tonight. Thanks for tuning in and watching. Until next week.